Hey guys, my name is Perla. I am currently 36 years old, and I was blessed to be born in Mexico. Um, so my family actually immigrated to the United States when I was about 3 years old. I grew up in Chicago, and my background with God a little bit. I feel like my mom always tried to instill God in us. I always believed that there was a creator. My family was great as far as trying to raise us in the, I like to call it the Catholic culture, because we were not devoted to the church. We just went for certain events, but then when we would get all cleaned up and look nice and then go home, and there was a bunch of issues that would happen. I grew up in a household where there was a lot of addiction, a lot of abuse, mentally, physically, sexually, and it just caused a lot of confusion for me as a young kid. There's been a lot of challenges, right? My parents did the best that they could with what they knew to do, coming into a whole another country where they didn't know the language and the barriers that came with that. But unfortunately, my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom was just a very quiet, submissive wife. I witnessed some things as a young kid that I shouldn't have, and it just caused a lot of hatred in my heart. I believe that the enemy from a very young age just planted a lot of bitterness and hatred, and those were kind of my biggest emotions that I would cling to and thrive on. So growing up, as I would hear about God, and I just didn't, because of some of the things I had gone through, I just didn't believe that He really cared for me. I felt like He created me, but I was kind of clueless of what was my purpose here. And so during my teenage years, I became addicted to alcohol myself. That's kind of what I saw my family doing when it came to dealing with issues or problems. We ran to something other than God. And so unfortunately, I got caught up in being very promiscuous, and just, I was very tomboyish growing up. But when I got to high school, I realized that I was starting to get attention from boys in a way that I wasn't used to, and I kind of ran with it, but putting myself in situations where I got introduced to alcohol, and just that opened the door for me to use it as a coping mechanism to deal with some of the pain that I had internally from being sexually abused as a child and all this stuff. But eventually, I ended up also running away from my house when I was young. So just started to really lead myself and care for myself at a young age. Through those years, I kind of didn't really went to church, didn't really talk to God. And I just kind of did my own thing, kind of became my own God. Really, nobody got to tell me nothing. I did not respect authority. I didn't trust adults. I was kind of doing my own thing for a couple of years. Eventually got into a relationship in high school on and off with a boy, and that kind of kept me, thriving to some level. But that relationship didn't last after high school. Got married young. Met my husband now in high school. He was just friends with me, but there's always rumors that he wanted to be in a relationship with me, but he just seems so much of a nice guy to compared to the guys that will grab my attention, which is more like, hey, you kind of get attracted to what you're used to seeing at home, or just your value. You don't value yourself that much. But after high school, me and him connected again, and shortly after, marry young. We when we got together, we didn't get married through like a church or nothing, because I felt like I had some kind of a religion background and he didn't really have any. And then one day my husband was like, "Hey, I'm gonna join the military." And I'm like, "Okay." We started that journey, and it was pretty crazy. As soon as he got graduated out of high school, he got stationed in Washington, and then shortly after he was given orders to go to Afghanistan. I just kind of felt in that moment like, hey, this might be a good moment to talk to God. So I remember my son was probably about 3 years old at this time, and I was sitting there in this empty apartment, and I was just like, hey God, my husband's going off to war, and it'd be pretty cool if you can bring him back home safe. But I know that it's also a possibility that that might not be the case. And so if that is the outcome, just pretty much help me be okay with my son. And Little did I know that, shortly after, during my husband's deployment, I actually encountered the Lord supernaturally in a Catholic church. Um, it changed my life forever. I got invited to a class, and so I went to this class, and I guess I kind of started to relate with the prodigal son. And in that class, they introduced me to the story of Jesus through the gospel, and in a way that I had never heard it, or at least my ears weren't open to receive it until that day. And I remember the gentleman that did the class had brought in these 3 nails. I've always been kind of gifted in art. Like I used to like sketching a lot and dancing and just photography. And so I always just catch things more, visually than I do reading a book. And so when he did this description where he got up on a chair and kind of, had us all close our eyes. And I remember he had dropped one nail at a time. And when these nails fell, I felt physically like something had like punctured my heart. And all I could do was weep and cry. But that day, when they were explaining the cross and what he had done for me, after he had dropped those 3 nails, internally I had said, why would you do this for me? And I heard a voice that told me that was how much he loved me. All I known my whole life was anger. That was an emotion that I thrived on, moved on, and made decisions on. And so after that moment, I just kind of wanted to know more about this Jesus, the familiar things of being in the Catholic Church, but the Lord didn't keep me there. I ended up eventually wanting to know more about this Jesus when I moved back to Washington when my husband was coming back from deployment, and realizing that, man, we don't think the same anymore, and he was getting a different wife when he came back from deployment, and I was going to receive a different husband as well because he had gone to war. But the Lord blessed me to meet this Christian woman at a park. She invited me to a Christian church, and that's where my journey began with Christianity. Was walking through those doors and learning and being taught the Word of God, and later on, even joining a discipleship. I did come from a background where my family mixed religion with witchcraft, so there was a lot of confusion there. The Lord began to teach me and really talk to me through the scriptures. I began to just bring a lot of clarity to a lot of things. And I just, been in love with him ever since, and been following with him ever since. And over the years, he's definitely built a confidence in me that I didn't even know I had. And that's just owning the fact that I'm his daughter, and that he has a purpose for me on this earth. Today, it's been an honor over the years. God has blessed me to do Bible groups with women. I have a lot of passion to help women in that area. And then now being part of the, United Prophetic Network team has been taking me to another level with him, and understanding that there's greater purpose within all of us. And he wants to use that purpose to reach others. And so I'm just grateful to be in this season where he continues to show me that he's held on to me. And as long as I keep walking in obedience to what he's called me to do, he's always going to meet me in every moment, and he can use anybody, somebody like me from a little ranchito in Mexico, to be at a place where now I get to not just pray for his people, but pray over the nations and be a voice for those that are silent and those that don't get to speak up. And my husband serves the Lord, my children love and serve the Lord, and so I'm seeing the fruit of it. That really you really can. Doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't determine where you go. So I'm living proof of that.